Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good morning. So today's our last class of this semester. So I'll also be doing a quick overview of the 6 Dharma gates in the Sublime in preparation to our upcoming retreat on the 6th of July. I hope everyone will be in attendance too. So we've gone over pretty much the entire list. We have gone over through the entire list. So I really just wanted to give a quick summary of each Sublime gate. Now, if you remember, the Sublime gates are it's a text written by Zen master or meditation master Ziyi. He is also the patriarch to our Tiantai tradition. And so he wrote 3 or 4 meditation texts, instruction manuals, basically. And the 6 Dharma gates of the Sublime is one of them. I believe this is the second or the third in the series. And what makes this text and all of the other texts that he's written about meditation invaluable is because they are direct instruction manuals to meditation. So again, as I mentioned before, back in the Buddhist time, meditation was pretty common. So there was no need for the Buddha to reiterate how to meditate to the majority of his disciples. And so there's very little traditional or orthodox meditation instructions from the Buddha. We have very few discourses like the Anapanasati Sutra, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, the 4 foundations of mindfulness discourse, but those are not necessarily, well, at least I don't consider them necessarily instruction manuals like this. What makes the 6 Dharma gates to the Sublime manual, I'm going to call it manual, valuable is because with each stage of the Sublimes, Chi gives us pretty specific details as to how to practice that specific gate and what to look for or how to observe its kind of completion, right? Meaning that once you've kind of mastered it to a degree, that this is the sign that you can move on to the next. And so which also makes this pretty valuable is because in order to advance, you have to complete each gate one at a time. You can't bounce back and forth or pick and choose which one you want to start with. As a starter and as an unmastered meditator, we have to start from number 1 and go down the list. Eventually, once you have mastered at least at the churning point, once we reach the churning stage, at that point we've mastered the list and we no longer need to start from the number 1 and go onward. But until we get to churning, the number 5, the 5th gate, we have to go in an order from 1 to 5 whenever we start our meditation practice. But once we've achieved the 5th gate of churning, we no longer need those requisites of having to kind of get into the zone to meditate. We can just be able to sit and do our meditation technique and kind of reach to to churning without having to go through the remaining or the subsequent gates. So the first gate is counting, which is the most traditional and basic meditation practice that we can do. So counting, ironically, is not necessarily the oldest method from the Buddhist time, but it still is a old method. But essentially, Chi gives us the instruction to count from 1 to 10 and kind of go back and repeat again, right? And so we take that counting process, and there's different ways to count. And I think at the beginning of the session, or when we started the Sublimes, I gave 3 different counting methods. So I'll quickly review those really quick. So the first counting method I gave is simply just counting from 1 to 10. So as you breathe in, you breathe out, that's 1, breathe in, breathe out, that's 2, and out 3, etc., up until 10. And then you repeat from 1 to 10 again. And at any point where you've either lost count or you got distracted or your mind has just casually and subtly got distracted, then you just repeat and you kind of reset and go back to 1. You can also, at some point, once you've recognized that it may have gotten a little bit redundant or kind of automatic, right? Because it will feel like that eventually. Eventually, it will stop. Counting will stop working. Counting is one of the most effective meditation tools or techniques that you can use, but after a while, it will start to lessen its potency and effectiveness. And so if you recognize that kind of subtly coming along, what we can do is now kind of switch it up a little bit. And when you count from 1 to 10, just count backwards from 10 to 1, right? As a little extra challenge there. It might seem like a challenge because it's something new, the brain doesn't recognize it, the brain will recognize it as something new and something that you really have to pay attention to. The second method of counting, which really isn't counting necessarily, but it's more following, even though it's the second gate, but it's more following the breath, right? Which does lean into the second gate, but actually, now that I think about it, let me refrain from that. Scratch that method. We're only going to stick to counting. The first counting method. The second counting method, I'm going to stick into the actual second gate. So my third, which is now the second counting method, is the method I call the +1 method. And I always have difficulty trying to explain it, and even in my book, when I've written it out in instructions, it was still very difficult to try to describe. So I'm going to attempt my best to describe my +1 method. It is essentially using either A, your breath as the counting, or a metronome of some sort, or the ticking of the clock. The clock is my favorite, but now that we don't have anything that's ticking in here, just use your breath. So when you breathe in, you're counting 1. You breathe out, you count 1 again. You're resetting the count, but then adding the next number. So in 1, out 1, in 2, out, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that make sense? Okay, everyone taking in a breath. That's 1. Exhale, 2. Inhale, reset. Inhale, it's 1. Exhale, 1. Inhale, 2. Exhale, 1. Inhale, 2. Exhale, 3. Inhale, 1. Exhale, 2. Inhale, 3. Exhale, 4. So you're breathing. For every breath, you're counting. But then once you reach whatever number you've reached, you're going to reset and just add numbers. So it's like counting, right? The traditional form of counting to 1, 2, 3, 4. But instead of continuing on, you're resetting after every number and then just adding another number. I'm so sorry. This is, for years I've been trying to explain this, and I cannot figure out a way, a good way to explain it. Man, I need like a linguist or something to help me with this. But hopefully that kind of just makes sense. So just imagine you're just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or you start at 1, and so what comes after 1 is 2. So when you reset, so for every breath you're counting 1, right? And then you reset, and it's 1, and then 2. You reset, 1, 2, 3, reset, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's in, it's 1, it's out. You reset, 1, 2, reset, 1, 2, 3, reset, 1, 2, 3, 4, reset, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reset, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, reset, 1, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. It's difficult to explain, and I need to find a better way to explain this method. But in my experience, that has been the most successful method in order to get into like real full concentration. So when I go into like deep meditation, when I have a long session and I go into deep meditations, that is the method I use, because it is the easiest and quickest way for me to kind of get into the zone. The reason why is to really pay attention to where you left off. And so when you reset, right, let's say you've reached 8. It's a high number because you've reset at that point 8 times. And so it forces your mind to really pay attention and to recognize and remember where you left off. That way when you reset, you can continue back and stop at 9 and then reset again. Because what would happen sometimes is even after you reset, you may continue on, and after a few minutes you find yourself counting to like 50 or 60. And you're like, oh wait, I'm like way off, right? And so it kind of becomes a self-catching method that you've lost concentration. Because counting in itself can become so habitual that even though you say, I'm going to stop at 10 and reset, again, you may find yourself counting to like 100 or 1,000 before you recognize, oh man, I'm so off. I've been counting this entire time, when really you're distracted and playing around with some entertaining thoughts. And so counting becomes effective because it forces you to really pay attention and to remember and recognize and realize where where you're at in the counting. Because if you've gotten distracted, you will either forget what number you're on, or you'll continue that number on to infinity until you recognize you've gotten distracted. So in and of itself, counting is kind of becomes your self-realized trap that you've lost concentration. So that's counting. According to Qi, when after a while, when we've come to a certain point where we've, what does he call it? A semblance realization and a genuine realization. So a semblance realization is where we've mastered it enough that counting just becomes just like mundane, like it's not effective anymore. It's not doing anything for you, right? So when you've come to the realization that it's not really doing anything for you, or it's not effectively holding your concentration, that's one method. Then you will only be able to determine if it's because you're bored, or because if it's ineffective, or if it's because you've mastered it enough where you no longer need that method. That exercise, that tool no longer is effective, right? And so the realization of that part is when you're able to do it without any effort, meaning that you don't have to force yourself to recognize and remember where you're counting or how you're counting or where you've left off in your counting. It comes and you're able to do it without any effort. There's no forcefulness in trying to count or remember your counting. It just comes kind of naturally, right? And so once you've accomplished that, then we come to following. And following, let me back up a wee bit. No, all right. Following shifts the attention from counting, right? Because in counting, typically even though the counting is your object of meditation, you still need an area of concentration. And typically it's the anapana spot. The spot right between your upper lip and your nostrils is called the anapana spot. And so you focus your attention in the spot as you're counting, right? Because otherwise, if you're counting, you're allowing your mind to kind of still float into space and have distractions arise and movies happen in your mind. If you bring that focus into one spot at least, it helps minimize distraction. It helps minimize the mind from wandering off. And so following, because once you've mastered that, you no longer need to count, right? The count. You no longer need to count. You no longer need to hold on to the anapana spot. And so following switches the attention from counting, right, from the actual counting to the sensation of the breath itself. And so we have the 6 exercises here, or the 16 superior phenomena, is that what you call it? Phenomena, yeah. Which are the effects of the 16 exercises in the Anapanasati Sutra. So in the Anapanasati Sutra, the Mindfulness of Breathing Sutra has 16 exercises that are similar to these, but I view the 16 exercises in the Mindfulness Sutra as the causes, right? Like those are the exercises you do to get these results. And so they kind of work hand in hand. And so when we shift our meditation from counting to following, these are the results of the effectiveness of following. What I also like to attribute to these is the 5 jhana factors. So last year when we were studying the jhana factors, right? The jhana factors are the applied attention, sustained attention, joy, bliss, and one-pointedness. And so if you look at the list, So if you look at the list, the first 4 would be applied attention. Apply attention meaning you have to apply your attention, your awareness, your meditation object to the breath, right? Because again, now we're following the breath. So instead of concentrating on Anapanasati, we're concentrating on how the breath feels as it enters. So you can still maintain the Anapanasati because you still want to be aware of how the breath is entering, how the breath is exiting. Is the breath coarse? Is it smooth? Is it shallow? Is it heavy? Right? Is the air warm? Is it cold? Right? So you're really feeling the sensations of the breath as it enters and exits your body. And then number 5 becomes sustained attention. Excuse my chicken writing. Sustained attention means that you have very little to no distractions happening. That if a distraction were to arise, you're easily able to recognize and be aware of it almost immediately and let it go. And you go back to your object of meditation, which is either continue to count or to continue to follow the breath. It's also at this point that you're in practically a semi-deep meditative state, where this is where, and you've heard me in the past say, where you lose some of your senses, right? So you lose a sense of feeling the pressure of your hand. So if you're sitting in meditation with your palm in palm, the sensation of that touch disappears. You no longer feel it, right? Or you feel it very little. You no longer feel the pressure of sitting down. You no longer feel kind of the pressure of your body, right? And so that those senses, some of your senses may disappear. Because you're getting to deeper and deeper meditation, now your mind and body is becoming in sync, right? They're now in unison. And so now not only is your mind becoming calm and serene, now your body is also becoming calm and serene. And so the pressures, the pains, the discomforts, all that tends to disappear, or it becomes to a point where it's not strong enough to distract you, right? You know it's there, you recognize it, you label it, and you just let it go. You move on, you continue on to your object of meditation. And then we get to the point of joy, which is already the 3rd jhana factor, of feeling the feeling of joy, of piti. Bliss is then the 4th jhana factor, and then this is technically the 5th jhana factor, which, again, it doesn't have to go in order, but these are some of the things that we can at least recognize as we're meditating to know kind of where we're at, right? All these 16 factors are there to help you gauge where you're at in your meditation. Because a lot of times people will come to me and say, oh, I don't know if I'm succeeding, I don't know if I'm getting better, if I'm getting worse, I don't know how to put value to my practice, right? Because they don't know what to look for. So these are those signs to know what to look for. And so a lot of them may never come to fruition for you, which is fine. Not all of them come to fruition for me either. But as long as you're able to recognize and know what they are, not recognize, but know what they are, that way, if they do arise in meditation, you're able to put a label to it. You're able to link it up to something. And that will help you understand where your mind is, help you understand where your practice is, help you understand how deep or how much more effort you need to apply to your meditation. And it's at this point, where access concentration happens, basically, right? Access concentration is concentration where that is strong enough that no distractions are able to hinder you. Distractions may still arise. Feelings and sensations and thoughts and emotions, all these things still may arise, but they're not strong enough to kick out your object of meditation. They're not strong enough to distract you and take over your session. They're there and they're in the background, they're wispy, but they're just there trying to distract you, right? But they're not strong enough to take you away from your object of meditation. So if you're able to maintain your object of meditation for the full or nearly full duration of your meditation, right, with little to no distractions, and be fully aware and concentrated on your object of meditation, then you can say this is access concentration. You can pat yourself on the back and say this is it. This is where I need to be. Because access concentration, even though there's deeper levels of meditation like the jhanas, that could potentially be beneficial for some, but access concentration is it. This is where you want to be. This is the perfect mind state of meditation that we want to be for general meditation. So that in itself is essentially I don't want to say the goal, but the prize you would win, essentially, at this level. And then, because once you've achieved that, which comes at the end of following, because once you've achieved access concentration, that means you've also achieved stabilization, the third gate. Because stabilization is essentially just that. You're able to stabilize and maintain your concentration for long periods of time. And per the instructions of the majority of meditation masters and teachers, including myself, the minimum amount of time that you can say I've succeeded in correct meditation is the minimum is 30 minutes. So if you're able to sit in meditation for 30 minutes with full concentration, meaning within access concentration, with little to no distractions, that is success. That is what constitutes, to me, and to Chi as well, is the completion and success of the stabilization gate. Is being able to hold and maintain your access concentration for the minimum of 30 minutes. There was something else I was going to say about that. It's also where stabilization is also where so as I mentioned before in following, as we get deeper into meditation, the senses of the body disappear, right? But in stabilization, one becomes aware of the body and mind seeming to vanish entirely as he then enters into meditative absorption. Again, meditative absorption in most cases means jhana, right? The jhana, there's 8 jhana levels. So the first 4 are the form levels, and then the last 4 are the formless. And so if we're able to succeed in stabilization and maintain it, then depending, I can't speak generally on this, unfortunately, but depending on what you experience and what you're going through and how and what just arises in your meditation, you may have achieved jhana, at least the first level of jhana, which is not uncommon, right? First level of jhana, even though it's not easy to attain, but if you maintain and have a stable practice, and you're able to meditate for at least 30 minutes consistently, then attaining the first jhana levels is pretty assured for you. And so it's at this level that first jhana level happens. And one of the signs of it's happening is, again, the loss of sensation of the senses. The body, you don't feel your body anymore. You may not hear the sounds. Well, you'll be aware of sounds, but they don't become distracting. Like if you hear the dog barking or the doors opening, the AC going on and off, the sense of those sounds disappear, right? You don't hear them. People can be walking around and talking, but you're so in the zone that it's blocked off, right? And so that's one of the signs. And so you can, once we've achieved that, right? But when and if that doesn't happen, and this happens to a lot of people, is once they recognize that, oh my God, I think I'm in access concentration, or I think I'm in first jhana, they get too excited and it kicks them out, right? So, because it's happened to me a lot of times. But be aware of that, okay? Don't get excited. Get excited after you finish your meditation. Not excited during the meditation, because that is the number one most common thing that happens, is people get excited, they recognize what something is, and it kicks them out of that stage, that level. So don't get too excited during the meditation. Get excited after you've come out. You're like, hey, I think something's happened. Then you can congratulate yourself. Then we move to, what's that? Contemplation. Contemplation, so the 6 gates to the Sublime are a meditation manual for both samatha and vipassana meditation, meaning concentration and contemplation meditation, or insight meditation. So the first 3 gates are specifically geared toward concentration, samatha, whereas the last 3 are associated with contemplation, or vipassana, or insight meditation. Because now, once you've achieved stabilization, you are concentrated enough or mastered enough in concentration where you can start to contemplate the Dharma. Because it's really difficult to do contemplation if you have not yet semi-mastered or mastered concentration. Because how can you contemplate something if you haven't been able to concentrate? Otherwise, if you try to contemplate on something, right, it's very easy for us to bounce between different ideas when we're contemplating. Because you may contemplate, let's say, the 4 Noble Truths, right? And you're contemplating that the first noble truth is that in life there is suffering. And so you start to contemplate and start to dig deeper into what does that mean? What does in life there is suffering? What is suffering? Well, how am I suffering? But then as you start to contemplate that, then you start to wander off into different ideas of suffering or dissatisfaction, or what makes you happy, or what makes other people happy. So you start to wander off, right? But we wander off because our concentration isn't strong enough. So we have to really be concentrated enough or mastered enough in concentration. That way, if we do start to wander, it's easy and we're quickly able to recognize that and bring us back so that we can continue to contemplate. But assuming we've achieved that, and now that we're in contemplation, the contemplation is where wisdom arises, okay? Because we cannot achieve wisdom. We cannot attain enlightenment simply through samatha meditation, concentration. That is not the objective of samatha. We cannot achieve enlightenment through samatha. We cannot achieve true wisdom through samatha. It's only through vipassana that we can achieve true wisdom, true insight, and enlightenment, liberation. Because concentration is just a tool. It's just helping us to get to that final destination. It is just the exercises that's taking you that needs to take you to the finish line. If Linda was here, I'd say just the same way that she trains to run a marathon, right? Same way to get to the finish line. Otherwise, if you don't train for a marathon, you're never going to make it to the end. A marathon's like what? How many miles? 20-something? It's like 26 and a half, 27, something, I don't know. But it's a lot, right? It's a lot. So someone who's untrained, who just casually decided wants to run a marathon, there's no way to be able to finish, at least not in a timely manner, right? So you have to train, you have to work your way up into that ability to be able to run that long. So it's the same way with our concentration. We have to really build on those building blocks in order to get to the finish line. And the finish line is the aha moments that we achieve through meditation. It is, whether it's partial enlightenment, full enlightenment, a quick glance into enlightenment, whatever it is. We have to work our way up there. And so contemplation helps us achieve that. And so contemplation in our practice is very important. We have to practice both concentration and contemplation meditation. Because if we don't contemplate, then our practice, our study becomes stagnant. We're just acquiring knowledge. Knowledge doesn't do anything to you except just give you a whole bunch of facts and information. But that doesn't help you, that doesn't alleviate you, that doesn't give you any insight into the true nature of reality. And the only way to achieve that is through contemplation. Because contemplation is how we achieve wisdom. It is how we achieve and penetrate through the defilements and ignorances of life to see its true reality. It is also through, so one of the primary objectives of Vipassana meditation, even though it's insight, but one of the first exercises that we have to do in Vipassana is continuing to watch the breath. So it is through contemplation, one of the first levels of Vipassana meditation is to go through the entirety of the 16 exercises in the Vipassana, the 16 exercises of the Anapanasati Sutra and the 16 superior phenomena that are here. It goes through this entire list. And then it goes through this entire list. And so then one contemplates the fine and subtle features of the breath, that is, as it goes forth and comes in. It is like a wind in the midst of space. The skin, the flesh, the sinew, the bones, the 36 categories of things that make up the body are all just devoid of substantiality. And so at this level, if you remember in previous classes, one of the other things that we can contemplate, and there's several things that we can do that we can contemplate on. But one of the ones I just mentioned, one of the main contemplation points is the parts of the body, the 32 parts of the body. And what else did I mention? The 32 parts of the body, and the 5 contemplations, and the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness probably comes first. It is the satipatthana of body, feelings, perceptions, and mental formations. Those are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that's one thing that we can contemplate. The other one is the 5 contemplations. So the contemplation of impurity, contemplation of compassion, contemplation of causes and effects, the contemplation of counting the breath, and the contemplation of the Buddha. So these are also the 5 contemplations. And the third practice, or third method of contemplation we can do is the 32 parts of the body. And the 32 parts of the body is one of the oldest and most traditional forms of contemplation because it does a lot of things. One, it helps us recognize the impermanence of the body, right? Because it goes through every little piece of the body. And it helps you overcome sensual desire or sensuality, right? Seeing that the body, even though externally someone may be beautiful, but externally we all share the same gross things, right? When you just open up a body and you see everything, all the guts and stomach and stuff just spitting out, that's not exactly attractive, right? And so it helps us see that everything is impermanent, especially beauty. Next we have churning. And so churning is it's the most difficult one for me to explain. Because churning is one of those things that only makes sense through experience. But just like its name, it's the turning point in the meditation practice, where at this point your meditation practice is perfect or nearly perfect. You've achieved access concentration, and you've achieved, at this point, potentially the first 4 levels of jhana, okay? And you've achieved the perfection of concentration meditation, samatha, and you've nearly perfected or completed vipassana, right? The insight meditation. And so it's really just it's the turning point of your practice. This is the turning point where you can say, I'm a true meditator now, basically, right? So because you've achieved realizations, you've achieved some insights, you've achieved the perfection of the preceding exercises and gates. It's also the wisdom of the mind that opens forth and develops in a way no longer requiring one to bring to bear additional skillful effort. Meaning, now that you know how to access concentration, or how to get into at least the first level of jhana, you don't need the other gates in order to help. Meditation, you need to go through each gate, always starting from the first and going onward every single time. But once we get to churning, because now this is the turning point where our meditation is perfect or near perfection, we don't need the prerequisite exercises in order for us to get there. We can sit and within minutes be into access concentration or enter jhana. Okay, because the other gates are simply just the are crutches, basically. They're the training wheels, right? And so once you've learned how to ride the bike, you don't need the training wheels. You take them off, and you can just get on your bike and drive off, right? So churning is essentially just that. We've taken off the training wheels of needing to count, of needing to follow the breath, of needing to contemplate, and so we can just enter meditation and go right in. Purification is 3 things happens in purification. The first is that one puts to rest the defilement of false thinking. One also puts to rest the defilement of coursing and discriminations. And one puts to rest the defilement of grasping at a self. And so when one is cultivating in this manner, one experiences a sudden penetration through to a circumstance wherein the mind accords with wisdom. Unimpeded, skillful means continuously manifest and abiding in the direct experiencing of samadhi, which is full one-pointedness concentration. The mind remains free of any dependence on anything at all. So at this point, you don't need any tools to meditate. You can meditate anywhere with anything and everything. You can be in the middle of a war and be able to meditate fully and enter samadhi. You can be in the midst of a concert and be able to meditate and clear your mind and not hear the music. You can be in the middle of a thunderstorm or a hurricane and meditate and not feel the destruction of the storm. You can be in freezing temperatures or in the middle of a snowstorm or something and meditate and not allow the coldness to affect you. At this point, you've fully mastered meditation. You've purified all the defilements. You've purified all the hindrances that hold you back. You've purified the mind. Again, it goes back to you put to rest the defilements of false thinking, right? False thinking is also what? The opposite of right thinking, of the Eightfold Path, right? So you perfected the mind, cleansed the mind at that point. You've also put rest the coursing and discriminations, meaning in this sense, is specifically referencing to the discriminations of the methods of meditation. So whether it's following this method of meditation or following other methods or techniques of meditation, you're no longer comparing what's better, what works, what doesn't work. You're no longer advocating that this is better than the other. There's no duality. Essentially, that's what you've done. You've cut off the view of dualism. And you've also put the rest of the defilement of grasping at a self, which is also what? Which is also the first of the 10 fetters, right? So again, the 10 fetters is what, or eradicating those 10 fetters is what allows us to attain one of the 4 initial levels of enlightenment. So the first 3 fetters, right, allows you to become a Sotapadana, a stream enterer, right? You've achieved enlightenment, but you still have some work to do. And then the 4th and 5th fetters are lessened, and you've attained Sakadagamin, once returner. And then once you've eradicated completely the first 5, because at that point, the 4th and 5th are lessened, but not eradicated. It's only at the 3rd level of enlightenment of Anagamin, the non-returner, where they've completely eradicated. And then once you've eradicated all 10, you become an Arhat, a fully enlightened one. And so by achieving purification, right, and you put the rest of the defilement of grasping at a self, that means you've eradicated the first fetter. You are one step closer to enlightenment. How encouraging is that? I think it's very encouraging. That puts that, at least for me, that gives me a sense of urgency to want to achieve that. Because I can tell how close one may be, how close I am. Like I'm just right there, right? And so it gives you, because once you've come to a realization in meditation, or have achieved something, right, it hopefully should spark this ignition within you, give you this encouragement, that sense of urgency that you want to continue on to achieve that, to want to achieve it fully, to want to achieve it permanently. Because a lot of our realizations and meditations are just that. They're just moments of realization. We have aha moments all the time. These are moments of enlightenment, okay? When you have that aha moment, that is a spark of enlightenment, okay? Don't think it's just a recognition of a good idea or recognition of something that you've kind of figured out, right? Sometimes it is, if it's something mundane, but if it's within your spiritual practice and you have those aha moments, those are sparks of enlightenment. It comes and goes. It's just a fraction of a second. And so our goal is to hold on to those aha moments so they can last longer and longer and longer until it becomes permanent and we're fully enlightened. Okay? And so when those sparks do happen, when those aha moments do happen, I hope that it brings that sense of urgency to want to continue and maintain those moments so that it can last longer and longer. And it gives a sense of achievement too, right? It's like, wow, like, I can do this. There's a sense of accomplishment, that this is not just futile work, that this is not just stories and realizations of other masters, of these ancient teachers, or of the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas. It's something that I can attain. And that's the beauty of meditation, is it allows you to see that you are completely 100% capable of achieving what these masters are teaching. It's not something alien. It's not something clear. Obviously, it's not something easy either. Otherwise, we would all be enlightened, right? But it's obviously achievable, right? There are dozens and dozens of stories of disciples or monks and nuns attaining enlightenment, doing mundane things after hearing these teachings, right? And so it's possible. We just have to believe it's possible and believe that we can do it. The worst thing you can do for yourself is self-discouragement. Thinking that I can't do this, or I can't sit for 30 minutes, or I can't sit for an hour, or I'm thinking too much, or I'm distracted too much, or whatever it may be, any of the hindrances that arise. That kind of talk is not good. It's like putting water in your gas tank in the car. It's not beneficial. It's not going to run. You're just going to ruin it. So we need to add the fuel, correct fuel. And that correct fuel is correct thinking, right thinking. Getting rid of the discouragements that we tell ourselves. Getting rid of the idea that I can accomplish that, or I can accomplish that in this lifetime. Right? I remember over a decade ago, I used to always want to play the violin. I was probably like 20, I don't know how old I was at the time, 20, in my mid-20s at least. I always wanted to play the violin. But at that time, that's when my life was starting to get very busy. At that point is when my career was flourishing. I just had bought a house. I just was extremely busy. So I would always tell my best friend that, well, I'll just learn to play the violin in the next lifetime, right? But I think it was like that year for my birthday or something, they bought me a violin and wrote a note, why wait till next lifetime? I was like, dang it, now I gotta do it now. So I taught myself to play the violin. It took a lot of effort, but I taught myself to play the violin, and then I taught myself to play the cello. So there's no such thing as, oh, I'll just do it in the next lifetime. That means you're just lazy. That was the realization that I came to. I was just lazy to learn. And then now I'm forced to learn it. I wasn't forced, but I was like, well, buy me something that's probably very expensive, so I might as well use it. So anyway, But that's the point, is don't put off wanting to achieve something. And there's a lot of times that I've seen in my life where a lot of people don't come to religion or spirituality until later in life, right? When they're like near dying almost. They're like, well, now I must confess. Now I must do my repentance. Now I must do all my confessions and accept religion so that when I die, I'm going somewhere beneficial, right? In Buddhism, that's too late. It's too late to start too late in life. Because if you wait too long, the best case scenario is you'd be at the moment of dying. And in Buddhism, the moment of dying is very important. Because depending on your mind state at the moment of dying, in some cases, can have more weight than your good or bad karma. Because at the moment of dying, if you are peaceful and happy and accepting of death and accepting that, just acceptance that you're about to pass, then your mind state is in a positive, wholesome place. And that way, when you do pass, it's more likely that you will be born in a better life. But if your mind is chaotic and in anger and hatred that you're dying, or hate that someone isn't there for you or is there for you and all this other stuff, then even if you have really good karma, if your mind state at the dying point is negative and unwholesome, you're more likely going to be born in an unwholesome, hellish life. So, but in Buddhism, because our practice is what allows us to become enlightened. Like, we have to put in the work, right? We can't just read and accept Buddhism and hope for the best. No, it's our practice, it's our diligence, it's our effort that we put into our practice that betters ourselves, that betters our mind, that betters our lives. And so the more time you have to do that, the better you are, the more enlightened you are by time of death. And so when you do die, you're more enlightened than someone who has not practiced, and then you're guaranteed a better next life. Or if you've achieved the first level of enlightenment of Sotapadana, the stream enterer, and according to the text, if you've attained stream entry, then you have no more than 7 lifetimes left in order to become fully enlightened. So at minimum, you have 7 more lives. But at least you're enlightened. So 7 is better than 7 bazillion for the common folk, right? Because if you remember in the sutras, how many, especially in the Lotus Sutra, when we were chanting the Lotus Sutra, how many stories, and when the Buddha was predicting enlightenment for his disciples, he says, in 5 million kalpas, you'll become this Buddha named this Buddha, right? And your lifespan will span 8 kalpas. A kalpa is an extremely long amount of time. The number of the calculation of what kalpa is debatable, but I reference a kalpa as the age of the universe. So the universe comes into existence and eventually has to die, right? It's going to lose that. It's going to lose momentum. It's going to lose the energy to sustain itself. And so that's trillions and trillions and trillions of years. To me, that's 1 kalpa. So imagine a Buddha predicting to his disciples that you'll become a Buddha in 10 kalpas. That means the universe has to live and die 10 times. How many zeros is that? It's an unfathomable amount of number, of time. We can't even imagine that. We can't fathom that number. So 7 lifetimes seems a piece of cake compared to 5 kalpas. Yes? So why would we not want that? Why would you not have motivation to achieve that? That's my motivation. That's why I became a monk. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to come back anymore. I'm done. I'm ready to end the cycle of life and death. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I think I'm at the end. I'm at the end. Look, I finally got a clock again. Okay, what are your questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? How many lives do you want to come back to? Yes. I'm sorry, say it? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily. So if you achieve something, let's say you've become, because again, there's different levels of realization, there's different levels of enlightenment. But once you've achieved that, you can't take it away. So it's stuck in your core consciousness. And so in the next life, even though you've forgotten it, if you were to learn it again, it will come much quicker and much easier for you. That way, that's why when bodhisattvas are reborn, right, they have to re-enlighten themselves again. So if you make a vow to become enlightened and become a bodhisattva for the benefit of all beings, if you become enlightened in this lifetime, your next lifetime when you are born again, you're still a bodhisattva, but you have to re-enlighten yourself again in order to become enlightened. But it becomes a much easier and quicker process. And so the more that happens, the quicker and easier it is to become enlightened over and over again. And so you may learn this and achieve this and realize this in this lifetime, but in your next lifetime, it'll come very easily for you. And you'll be able to attain that realization much quicker, right? Which is why in 7 lifetimes, you have only 7 more lifetimes, each lifetime becomes easier and easier and easier, which is why you have 7 instead of 7 kalpas. It's still something. Correct, yes. When you've attained and realized or accomplished something, there's no taking it away from you. It's there. It is stamped into your consciousness. And so it becomes just like riding a bike. Let's say you haven't ridden a bike since your teenage years. It's not a skill that you've forgotten. It's just a skill that you're not as good at anymore. But as soon as you get back onto the bike, it'll come back all back to you as if you've never left it. It's the exact same way in your next lifetime. That skill will always be there. Which I think it's, like, I'm thankful for that. Because can you imagine having to relearn everything from the very beginning over and over and over again? As if you've never heard it before? Think of a skill, or think of something that you do in life that just comes easy and naturally to you, right? Whether it's drawing or painting or reading or writing or cooking or anything, any skill, any activity, any knowledge that just comes easy and natural to you, right? That's probably because it's something you've done in past lives. Look at these tiny little like kid geniuses, or kids that are like learning how to play piano or the violin at age 2 without ever learning it. How'd that happen? They just randomly wake up one day and be like, hey mom, give me a violin, I'm gonna be the next Virtuoso or something. You know what I mean? No. It's because in the past life, they were masters at it. And so when they come to this life, it's easy. They can just pick up that skill and continue on. That's how realization happens. That's attainment. That's why it's called attainment. Because you attain something. And you will maintain it for future lifetimes. Any other questions? Okay, well, that will give us a short time to meditate, but go ahead and stretch if you need to. We'll sit for meditation. Welcome back. So that concludes our 6 Dharma gates to the Sublime. I hope that these instructions and methods and techniques will be beneficial to your practice. I hope, if anything, they give you some doable exercises to do to help you attain and achieve your realizations into the phenomena of life. But even though I've condensed an entire book into what is it, 6, 7, 8 classes that we've had, hopefully it was enough to at least give you an idea of what needs to be done, and also give you a chance to read the book for yourself as well. When you come back, it's of course our last class, and we'll have some meditation class sessions during the summer. Just like last year, there won't be any discussions. It'll just be full sit and walk meditation. In preparation for our retreat on the 6th of July, so I hope everyone will be able to attend. And then after the summer break, we'll continue with another of Chi's meditation manual. It's I think it's number 1 or number 2 of his 4. Technically, it should have been, that one should have came first before this one, but I think this is a better one to start with, because in our next session, for the other meditation manual, it's much more in depth. So I think this is an easier one to start with. So, with that said, I want to thank everyone for joining me on this lovely journey of the 6 gates of the Sublime. I hope we all achieve that sublime state of meditation, their continued practice, diligence. And I'll see everyone either tomorrow or during a retreat, or in future lifetimes when we all attain Buddhahood. Thank you. Namo Shakya.